Well, this Saturday, the seventh and final voting phase of India's massive election began. This round covering 57 constituencies across several states. The election is considered one of the most consequential in India's history. If Prime Minister Narendra Modi wins, he'll be only the second Indian leader to retain power for a third term. He is immensely popular. His Hindu Nationalist Party has dominated politics in the country. But during his time in office, there have been brazen attacks and hate speech against minority Muslims. And critics say India's democracy is faltering. For more, let's speak to Dr. Irfan Nooruddin from Georgetown University. Hello to you. Can you tell us, first of all, what is the highlight of this final phase of this massive election?
Well, 7 weeks of voting, almost 900 million eligible voters. It's a remarkable feat logistically, but also just an affirmation of the strength of India's democracy. Today, 57 constituencies, the final 57, went to the polls. Among them, Prime Minister Modi's seat in the historic religious city of Varanasi. So that is, in some sense, the biggest constituency voting today. But at the end of this, all evening long in India, there'll be exit polls finally. We'll finally have some visibility into what may happen when the results are released on June 4th. And we'll, in many ways, in spite of incredible amounts of commentary over the last 7 weeks, we've been doing it without much data. That's about to change. And so things get pretty exciting pretty quickly.
Yeah, and spoiler alert for our viewers, BJP is going to win, right? In the last election, they won 353 of the 543 seats. But this time around, they were aiming even higher, 400 seats, something that had only been done once in the history of India's democracy. Do you think they will get those 400 seats?
I'm doubtful that they will get to the 400 seats. So anything's possible. Many of the seats in India's elections are very, very competitive. And so small swings in turnout, either for the BJP or against BJP, can really have pretty significant changes. The BJP only won 45% of the vote, along with its coalition partners, in 2019. And as you said, that translated into 353 seats, well over 50% of the seats in parliament. So a small shift, if they manage to go from 45 to 48, they might get to 400. But on the flip side, if they go from 45 to 42, that 353 could very easily drop to about 300. Most of the betting markets in India's very competitive elections currently have the BJP settling in closer to about 260 to 270 seats on its own, and its coalition partners winning another 25 to 35. So spoiler alert, yes, the coalition should be in really strong position to form a government, but most expectations right now, prior to the exit polls, is that the BJP on its own might fall short of an outright majority, and will have to form a coalition to form the next government.
And in that case, this would perhaps be sort of a moral victory for the opposition led by the Congress Party and Rahul Gandhi.
If that comes to pass, it'd be incredibly so. I mean, it's not just a moral victory. It completely revitalizes a party that was really seen as being pretty close to being defunct. The Congress Party in 2014 was reduced to just 40 seats in parliament. I mean, this was the party of India's national independence movement. It had ruled pretty uninterrupted up to 1975. Formed governments again in the 80s, has been part of coalitions as recently as 2014. So to be reduced to 40 seats was absolutely embarrassing, and it led to the BJP talking about a Congress-free India. So if the Congress can rebound its fortunes to get to closer to 100 seats on its own, and then with the coalition form a really robust opposition, it revitalizes that opposition. And remember that India has all these state elections that occur off cycle. So later in the fall of 2024, 5 states, including pretty significant, large economically important states, go to the polls to elect their own state assemblies. And if this comes to pass, you would imagine that opposition goes very confidently into that next set of elections, believing that they have found a campaign rhetoric that is resonating with voters.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. On a state level, the BJP holds only about a third of India's more than 4,000 state assembly seats. Why is it less dominant on a state level than a national level?
The BJP has established an incredible stronghold in what we refer to as the Hindi heartland, which is North India. and a largely Hindi-speaking population. Where it has failed relatively to make much inroads is in the south and west of the country. And these are states that are dominated by regional parties. These regional parties are very, very strong within their states. They can almost never win any seats outside of their own states. They're really state specific parties. And there the BJP has struggled mightily. The Congress used to as well. So what we've had in the north of India is the BJP slowly but steadily replaced the Congress as the main party. But in the south, where they have to compete with these state specific parties, they have not done quite as well. That's both, I think, that the BJP doesn't have the same organizational strength at the grassroots level in the southern states. It is at the end of the day a northern state. But that some of the issues that the BJP champions, Hindi as a national language, a particular version of Hindu nationalism, don't resonate as well in the South, and in fact might cause some opposition in the South who see this as imposition of Northern values on the rest of the country.
Let's assume Narendra Modi gets this third term. What do you think is the top of his agenda for that coming term? What do you think awaits us in terms of foreign policy or domestic policy?
Foreign policy is unlikely to change irrespective of any of the scenarios, whether the BJP wins with a very big majority, whether it sort of limps into office on a coalition, or in fact, if you have the ultimate surprise and even the opposition wins. India's foreign policy has really stayed pretty bipartisan, if you would. A much more assertive role globally, still trying to figure out what role it wants to play in the region, but the stronger relationships that India has forged, both under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and under Prime Minister Modi with France, with the UK, with the United States, that I don't think changes much at all. But domestically, this has quite different depending on whether the BJP comes in with a big majority, gets close to that 400 seat mark or not. 400 seats, and I think the BJP's agenda to amend the constitution to introduce, for instance, a uniform civil code, to change rules about reservations for lower caste citizens in India, all of those come into play. The reason they were talking about 400 is because they want a majority that would allow them to amend the constitution, which currently they cannot. On the other hand, if they come in somewhat chastened, in spite of their incredible confidence, really not succeeding in getting the majority on their own and needing to form a coalition, I suspect we change rhetoric and it becomes a lot more focus on the domestic economy, where in spite of some of the headlines, the truth is they have really been battered. And the Congress and the opposition have succeeded in making the point that some parts of India have done quite well, but the majority of the country is in danger of being left behind. So I think you see a focus on welfare, populist kind of politics instead.
Irfan, thank you very much. Irfan Nooruddin speaking to us
You're very welcome.
from Washington. Thank you.